Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, many different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they probably are still best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but they also do a bunch of other things that are also very good. So personally, I would be tempted to describe them as a very well-rounded and solid brewery. Now, the beer we're going to have a look at today is a new version of one that we tried a couple of years ago on the channel. It's a style that I know these guys can do very well, and it's also got a little bit of a twist to it that we haven't had too many of from this brewery before, and this beer is quite a highly rated one actually. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we review the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. But for this review, we are going to return to the wonderful OO Brewing. So the beer we're going to have a look at today is a new version of the Arctos, which is one of their long-time Imperial Stouts. This is the 2020 edition, but it's been bourbon barrel-aged. It comes in at 13% ABV, and this was released in March of 2023 through Systembolaget. I can't remember if this was part of the Lokal Småskaligt or whether it was one of the Tillfälligs actually, I really cannot remember. But we reviewed one of the original Arctos releases back in 2019, and that was a very nice kind of old school roasty toasty Russian Imperial Stout. So I'm very curious to see how this one behaves when it's been put in bourbon barrels. It doesn't say exactly how long it's been aged for. I had a little look on the Untappd page, and I also had a wee look on the website and stuff as well, but there really wasn't any information about just how long this one's been in the barrel. But I guess if it was brewed in 2020, it's at least 2 years that this one's been there, and it's probably been sitting in the bottles a little bit, waiting to go out through Systembolaget, because they do of course take a little bit of time to get things out there. But yeah, definitely cool to return to this beer and to try the bourbon barrel-aged version of course, and always nice to review the new releases from OO Brewing as well. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about. Hopefully this is another good beer. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from OO Brewing before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the search bar, put your home state, county, prefecture, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries, and you'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many other things, and there are playlists there from a number of other countries as well, and that is constantly being expanded. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about OO Brewing once again. So, OO Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and this company was founded back in 2011 by Olaf and Ole Andersson, who are not related to each other, but they are childhood friends. And for many years, these guys were also avid home brewers, and that was what really kind of got them into being professionals, of course. But they'd always been very interested in beers, and Ole was very heavily involved in the Gothenburg beer scene since pre-drinking age. He was one of the original, or the original, I guess you could say, head brewer at Stigbergets Brewery, and this is where the OO Brewing beers were originally produced. And, you know, he was the creator of some of the really famous New England hazy IPAs here in Sweden. So there was Narangi, which was released through OO Brewing, and of course under the Stigbergets name you had the GBG Beer Week beer for 2016, and then slightly after that you had the Amazing Haze, and of course the other one that we should really talk about in this case is the Opigårds New Sweden IPA, and Brewski were doing some very good things in that category at that time as well. So yeah, those are some. Ole Andersson was one of the big players when it came to the New England hazy IPAs, starting off here in Sweden. But while Ole takes care of the brewing side of the business, Olaf manages the business side of things, and apparently these guys just want to make beers that they would enjoy to drink themselves. But in April of 2017, Ole left Stigbergets to fully invest his time with OO, and the company got a premises in the Hisingen area near the Tingstedt Bridge. There they've got a 2,000 litre brew kit, which means they can brew up to 500,000 litres of beer per year, and in the first year they brewed 100,000 litres, and they're basically working their way up to capacity at the moment. They brewed about 300,000 litres, I believe, over the course of 2020, and in 2021 they brewed even more than that, and they took over the premises of the Bang restaurant, which acts as their new tap room, and this opened back in the summer of 2021. Over the following years, they've continued to just build up their sales, survive the pandemic and this kind of thing, and as of April 2023, when we're filming this review for you, these guys have produced 105 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. But yeah, my favourite beers that I've had from these guys, the Long Boil Barley Wine is a nice one, and apparently there's a barrel-aged version of that coming out very shortly. So you'll see that in a few videos' time, I have no doubt. But yeah, Long Boil Barley Wine was a favourite of mine. Of course, Narangi you can't go wrong with. And the Muscles and Evergreen, those were two really nice, kind of more old-school West Coast IPAs. But the 50/50 series, the E-Core series, and the 100 series are all very interesting as well. They teach you quite a lot about hops. You know, the 50/50 series, they've got two types of hops in there. The 100 are the single hops, and then the E-Core series, usually they do the different. They choose one hop and then they put, like, you know, cryo, the pellets, and all these kind of things in it. They put the same hop but in different forms, just to show you how it can affect the flavour. And that's a very good series to try as well. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about OO Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. So there you can see a little bit more of a kind of old school label on this one, OO Brewing, Gothenburg. Just going to remind you of some of the really old Imperial porters and stuff that you come across and things. But yeah, I do quite like the label on this one. As I said, this beer was released, I believe, in March of 2023, but I honestly can't remember whether this was a local Osmoska League release or whether it was one of the Tillfällig assortments. You know, the Tillfälligs come out pretty much every Friday. But you can see they've got an O on the bottle cap there, which is quite nice. It's a 330ml bottle. I believe I paid about 90 or 100 Swedish kronor for this one. Let's just say 100, because that seems a little bit more reasonable considering what this beer is. So that translates to roughly €10, £9 sterling, somewhere in the region of $11 American. But yeah, I think that's pretty worth it. Oh, it does actually say on the side here, Imperial Stout brewed in the autumn of 2020, aged on bourbon barrels, at least 12 months, brewed and bottled by OO Brewing, Export Gatan, Hisingsbacka. So yeah, obviously I thought everyone wondered if it would have been 2 years that it had been in the barrels. But it says this one contains rye malt as well, so I do think this one will still be a little bit roasty and toasty, but we'll see what effect the bourbon barrel has on this one. But as I say, the Arctos Imperial Stout 2020 edition, bourbon barrel aged, a 2023 release, we should point out. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. So, nice little bit of smoke on the opening there, and we'll just get it out. And I'll tell you something, when you open this bottle up, it smells absolutely lovely. Look at that. Beautiful looking beer, I have to say. Yeah. So hopefully it tastes as good as it looks, but quite often with the OO Brewing beers, they tend to. That's just my experience. But yeah, that looks very nice, I have to say. So before the head disappears on this one, because it is 13%, it will disappear quite quickly. We can see that this beer poured with about an 1/8 finger of a kind of foamy ring. There's not really much head sticking around with this one, but the ring just goes around the edge of the glass there. You can see there's a mix of medium and big bubbles in there, but it looks very, very nice, this one, I have to say. Yeah, I do like this one for sure. It looks great. If you shine the light through this beer, you can see that it does have a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge to it, but definitely more of a kind of dark ebony rosewood colour, this one, which is what you'd expect from an Imperial Stout, of course. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil plays a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts that you put in can affect the colour of your beer as well. But when it comes to black beers like Imperial Stouts, it's very, very difficult to actually affect the colour of these beers just with barrel aging. It's a little bit easier with the brown beers, such as the barley wines and the doppelbocks and Scotch ales and stuff like that. But yeah, not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this beer. One or two big bubbles toward the bottom of the glass, and a few little ones just going up toward the surface there. But yeah, it looks very nice. Nothing particularly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is. So I think we should have a wee look at the aroma of this one then, and just see what it's all about. Oh yeah, this is nice. This is definitely nice. Now, I've said this in many videos before, but I do miss the more old school Imperial Stouts like this. I love a good old school RIS. I love an Imperial Milk Stout, Imperial Coffee Stouts as well. I really enjoy. I'm not the biggest fan of the kind of pastry stouts that are going out there these days. I'm not a great fan of the kind of granola flavour. Some of them can be very nice, of course, don't get me wrong. But yeah, give me the more old school ones any day of the week. But I'll tell you something, this has got a really interesting aroma. Just on the first impression, you do get the barrel out of this one, but you've also got this really kind of slightly dry, slightly toasty, chocolatey note, which kind of dominates in the beer. A little bit of red fruit, a little bit of smoothness in there, and yeah, the way this goes together, I think, is it's really, really nice. So yeah, lovely aroma on this one. I'm going to give them a thumbs up on that, but let's try and break this down and just describe it for you a wee bit more kind of in depth, should we say. But it really does remind me like of a very syrupy kind of hot chocolate, actually, something like that. That's the kind of aroma you're getting out of this one. So the backbone of the beer, absolutely, you get that lovely smooth oaky character out of this one. And as I've said in many videos before, for me, American oak is a lot smoother than its European counterpart. So you can really smell in this beer that it's got that lovely smooth oaky kind of note, which is great. And it's American oak for sure. There's a little bit of vanilla in there, and then on top of that you've got some of the on top of that you've got some of the bourbon just coming out of it, which is great. On top of that, definitely you've got a little bit of a roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, but it actually smells a little bit kind of smoother than that, which is interesting. Like you do definitely get the rye bread out of this beer, which I certainly enjoy. So yeah, a nice little bit of kind of brown rye bread coming out of this one. The well-fired bread crust is in there as well. And then yeah, above that you start to get the chocolatey notes out of this one. There's a little bit of nutty character to this beer as well. We point that out within the kind of brown bready notes. You do get a little touch of nuttiness in this beer. And it smells lovely. So yeah, the rye bread has the wee bit of nuttiness in there. There's a little touch of like an almost tobacco-y note to this one as well, which is kind of interesting. That little bit of sweetness in there. As I've said in many videos before, I've never smoked in my life, but we used to experiment a lot in the lab with the rolling tobacco, because you could use it for toxicology and stuff. So it's a very good way to learn how to do how to do analytical measurements and stuff like that. So you can smell a little bit of the almost tobacco-y note in this beer. But above the bready character, you start to get the chocolatey notes out of this one, and it's kind of interesting because there is definitely a little bit of a kind of roasty, toasty element to the chocolate in here, and it's like it is kind of like a quite thick hot chocolate. It really reminds me. It reminds me almost of that the signature hot chocolate that they had in Japan from Starbucks when I was there a few weeks ago. That's really what I'm getting out of this one, to be honest with you. So that's that for me. That's really quite interesting. Yeah, on top of the the chocolate, then you can feel there's a little bit of a gradient with the chocolate in this one. So at you're getting a little bit of a kind of 80-90% cocoa chocolate in this beer, and also a little bit of roastiness. But there's also a wee bit of a milky character as well, I would say. So that's kind of interesting for me. Yeah, I really like how that goes together for sure. But like I say, it has this syrup, this kind of hot chocolatey note to it, which is interesting. The chocolate kind of almost saturates your nose a little bit. But on top of that, you get some of the brown sugars. There's an element of a leathery kind of brown sugar in there. And one of the things you'll find with Imperial Stout, sometimes they can have a slightly longer wort boil to make the brown sugars caramelise a little bit more. And what that translates to in the nose is a more leathery and slightly drier brown sugary character. You can often detect it in the palate. It's a bit easier to do that than when you taste the thing than by smelling it. But I do wonder if this beer is going to have had a slightly longer wort boil. So you've got that leathery caramel note in there. There's a bit of toasty brown sugar sitting on top of that. Then you've got the more oily. Then you definitely have the more kind of oily treacle molasses type thing that comes out of this one. So yeah, the fruity character, the brown sugary character in this beer is really quite interesting. It gets drier and drier the more that you smell of it. So yeah, the way that goes together is really, really nice. On the hoppy side of things then, let's move on to that. Now you have to remember, Imperial Stouts are not the most hop forward of beer styles, but and again, this one's been barrel aged, so quite a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this one, but you can still get a little bit in this. So for me, there's a wee bit of earthiness in there, at the back of the nose for sure. You've got a brighter floral aromaticity, and you also have some of the really nice kind of grassy aspects coming out of this beer as well. So there's just a wee bit of green component, this earthiness, herbal note, and a little bit of floral and grassy kind of thing too. But the more that I smell this beer, the more I get that kind of chocolate brownie kind of note out of this one. Chocolate brownie, hot chocolatey type character. So yeah, interesting stuff. On the fruity side of things, it is kind of what you'd expect. There's a little bit of a sharper kind of raisiny note in there. There's also that little bit of kind of prune underneath, and quite a little bit of plum actually, I would say. For me, the fruity characters in this one are quite sharp. It's like the mainstays are raisin, plum, and blackberry. So the way that it goes together in that sense, I think, is really quite interesting. So yeah, an interesting smelling beer, I have to say, this one. The fruity side of things is really nice, and the general vibe of the beer, I think, is very good as well. So big thumbs up from me. As I always say, take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But yeah, this one has a little bit of everything actually. But yeah, the more that I smell it too, it gets more kind of like that hot chocolatey, syrupy type thing. And there is a little bit, I should point out, there's a wee bit of like sultana and stuff like that underneath the fruits for this one as well. It does have a wee bit of a drier kind of sultana and figgy note to it underneath. But yeah, lovely, lovely smelling beer, this one. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we try this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Arctos Imperial Stout 2020 edition, bourbon barrel aged, a 2023 release from Brewing in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. A 13% bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout. This is going to be a monster. But cool to return to this beer and have a little bit of a twist to it. But Slange, Skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty damn nice, I have to say. The barrel plays a big role in this one actually. I remember this beer being, I remember the original Arctos being a big roasty toasty beast of a thing, but this one's a really nice and smooth, really nice big smooth Imperial Stout. So yeah, that is nice, but you get more roastiness and toastiness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that you go. So, yeah, lovely stuff. It really is. It's got a lovely sweetness to it, this beer as well, but it just mellows out and becomes drier and drier the further into the aftertaste you go. But it's like a dry sweetness that you get out of this one. It's got a little bit of fruity character, a little bit of hoppiness. It's a very, very well-rounded beer, this one. Like, really, really enjoyable. So, as I say, it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, interesting. So, on the... we're going to break this down and describe it a bit more in depth for you. We'll start in the middle third of the palate, as we always do. So, yeah, middle third of your palate with this beer. The backbone of this one, you've got that lovely smooth American oaky bourbon character in there. And the woody character, it's a little bit smooth, but it almost comes across as a little bit wet in some ways, which I find quite interesting. And then, yeah, further forward on the woody, further forward on the woody part of the beer, you get a little touch of like nuttiness in there. There's a little bit of an almond, a pecan type thing. So yeah, you can feel that nice woody American oaky smoothness in there. The little bit of a more nutty character as well. Like there's a little bit of vanilla mixed in with this kind of nutty note, and then above that you start to get the bourbon spirit, and I think the bourbon becomes a little bit more obvious the further into the aftertaste you go, but the woodiness that you get out of this one is very, very smooth actually. It's a bit of a strange comparison to make, but the level of smoothness you get in the woody flavour in this beer is actually almost akin to, it really is almost akin to like a Flanders Red or something like that. But at the same time, when I think about this beer, it reminds me of one of the big Imperial Stouts that we had. We had the one that we had from Gamma recently in Copenhagen, and we also had a similar one from Frau Gruber down in Germany. Was it Phantom Lord or something? It had the same type of smoothness to it. So yeah, I wonder if it's a specific type of bourbon barrel that gives you this particular sort of woody flavour. Be very curious to know that, what kind of bourbon barrel it is they've used. But yeah, anyway, as I say, above the kind of smooth woody note, you get that bit of the bourbon spirit, and then you start to get the above that you start to get the kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, and then you have the nice kind of smooth rye bready character in this one. And the rye bready note, it's almost like fluffy and kind of wet at the same time. So you have roasty, well-fired bread crust, the fluffy rye bready notes, and yeah, the way this goes together on that side of things is really, really nice. But you can feel above the kind of rye bread, the rye bready layer almost has a little bit of a kind of spongy, cakey type note to it. And then yeah, above the kind of rye bready note, you start to get the brown sugars in this one, and the brown sugars are very layered. So above the kind of rye bready note, you get a smooth kind of leathery layer, and the leathery brown sugars that you get in the beer, as I say, that's usually an indicator of a slightly longer wort boil. Which is interesting, although the thing we've missed actually, I feel, is the chocolatey layer. So the chocolate actually, I would say, sits above the bread and below the brown sugar. So we'll take the chocolatey layer. At the back of that middle third of your palate, you get a maybe 80, sort of 80-ish% cocoa chocolate note out of this one. It's got a little bit of roasty character to it, it's a wee bit drier, but as you come further forward along that middle third of your palate, it's got a little bit more of a kind of, it gradually kind of comes up to a 40 or 50% cocoa chocolate. So as I've always said, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate, sweeter flavours come out further forward. But as I say, above the kind of chocolatey layer, you get the brown sugary note. So there's a lovely kind of leathery brown sugary note on top of there. It's very, very smooth. Then you start to get a little bit of the kind of sweet. You get a little touch of roasty, toasty caramel in there, and then there's a circle of a sweeter caramel, and in the dead centre of that middle third of your palate, you've got the more treacle molasses type notes coming out of the beer. So yeah, the middle third of your palate is where the majority of the complexity in this beer is, and it's absolutely lovely. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is really, really nice. Yeah, middle third of your palate, it's really good. But like I say, the thing that stands out for me in this beer is the smoothness of the bourbon wood, the nice kind of bready notes in there, and then the mix between the brown sugar and the kind of roasty, toasty side of the chocolate. I like that. So, the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. It's like a rye bread, but it's kind of drier and more kind of grainy almost. And then you've got similar layers to what we had in the middle on the back third of the palate. So you can see a drier, more oaky, woody character in this one. So yeah, drier, more oaky, woody character there. Then you get the bourbon spirit, which again feels a little bit more toasty. The well-fired, roasty bread crust in there has a real dryness and stuff to it. And then above all of that, you have a little bit of a more you have the rye bready notes in there, and like I say, it's almost like a kind of like a dry chocolate sponge cake that you get out of this one with a wee bit of brown sugar mixed in. So you can feel that layer is there. It's a little bit more tall and airy, and then you've got a kind of the rye bready character, and above all of that, you can feel some of the drier, more roasty, chocolatey, nibby elements just sitting on top of it. So the layers on the back third of the palate are quite similar to what you have in the middle, but they're just taller and more airy. Above everything else, you've also got the kind of yeasty character coming out of this beer, which is very nice. So, yeah, in terms of the yeasty side of this beer, the yeasty side of things for me, it's like a very light and more, it's like actually it's a bit more of a dense kind of wholemeal brown bread, farmhousey brown bread. There's a little bit of honeycomb in there and a wee bit of woodiness, and as I say, you can feel all these things just sitting on top of everything else on the back third of the palate. So yeah, you can feel that the back third of your palate, the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But yeah, it goes together very nicely. Let's look at the hoppy side of the beer. So as we said earlier, the hoppy side of the beer is not the most prominent thing, because it is an Imperial Stout, and it is an Imperial Stout, and you know it has been bourbon barley, so a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out, but you still can get quite a little bit of that in there. So back corners of the palate, you've got a little bit of earthiness there, and it quickly, as you move further forward, it kind of quickly changes to be more kind of smooth and herbal. And as you reach toward as you move toward the kind of front corners of the palate, it's got a little bit more of a kind of floral aromaticity to it. So yeah, bright floral aromaticity, a little bit oily. Then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a wee touch more kind of it is a little touch more grassy, I would say. It's got a little bit more of an oily character to it as well. But yeah, I like that about this one, definitely. So, on the hoppy side of things, like I say, it's not an overly bitter beer, this one, but you can get the remnants of that green component there. Let's look at the front third of your palate just to round off. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. It's like a more kind of fluffy and smooth and slightly wet rye bready note there. But you've also got the smooth bourbon oak in there. You get a little bit of a sweeter character out of the bourbon spirit. I've always said that American bourbon is sweeter than Scotch whisky, so you can notice that here. And then above that, you get that nice oily bubble where the fruity esters roll the way out of the beer. So let's look at those fruity notes that come out of this one. So, when you take the beer in, there's a little bit of a raisiny sharpness in there. Underneath that, you do get a kind of bit of a juicy plum actually coming out of this one. There's a wee touch of like and the further into the aftertaste you go, there is a little bit of this kind of, it's got a little bit of that kind of phenolic-y medicinal type quality to it, but not too much actually. It's really got that dark, sharp, almost cherryish type note that you get from really high percentage cocoa chocolate. So you got the raisin, the plum, and then the sharper kind of almost cherry flavour underneath. But as you move further forward along that front third of your palate, you'll notice that as you reach the middle of your of the palate, you start to get a wee bit of a more kind of juicy figgy type note in there. Then the front half of that front third of your palate, you've got a lovely kind of you've got a lovely sort of black curranty type base, and then the oily blackberries, the sharper and oily blackberries just sitting on top of that. So yeah. Yeah, I mean the way that this goes together, I think, is really nice in that sense. You get the sharper, juicy, fruity notes just coming out of it the further into the aftertaste you go. But yeah, this beer for me is really interesting. It's quite, the bourbon barrels had quite an interesting effect on this, because I remember Arctos being a very kind of punchy and dry, roasty, toasty Imperial Stout, but the bourbon barrels had a really nice effect on the beer, so it gets a thumbs up from me. But I think this is the time to round off the review with the mouthfeel. For me, it's definitely a full-bodied Imperial Stout, there's no doubt in my mind about that. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's almost kind of silky, actually, the mouthfeel to this one. One of the things you have to remember about these beers, of course, is that when you use barrel aging, you're always going to sacrifice a little bit of the mouthfeel, but if they know they're going to barrel age it, quite often they kind of factor that into their brewing and just they factor it into the brewing and just thicken up the mouthfeel with a wee bit more oats or something like that. So yeah, the way that this one goes together, it feels like that. This is one of the thicker barrel aged Imperial Stouts that I can think of that I've come across actually. But yeah, it's still very, very smooth, very, very silky. In terms of the IBU count, it's a bit hard to say with this one. There is a bit of roasty toastiness in there. You have got a wee bit of the woody smoothness. And yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. So yeah, I'd be curious about this too. I wonder if this is double mash or anything like that. It feels like it could have been double mash before it was barrel aged, and that of course is going to give you the bigger, thick mouthfeel. But it also does feel as if there's a little bit of a longer wort boil going on there, and that gives you the kind of drier, brown, sugary notes. So yeah, the malt base, like we said, you've got a lovely smoothness and slight sweetness and things from the barrel. You've got a kind of almost fluffier, and you've got a big kind of fluffy and smooth sort of brown sugary. You've got a big fluffy and kind of cakey, I think, cakey and bready type note in the middle. You've got smooth brown sugars in there and a wee bit of sweet character as well. Yeah, the malt base really gives you a little, and the barrel together give you a little bit of everything in this one, and a wee bit of dryness too. I think this beer gets more and more dry the further into the aftertaste that you go. But IBU count, hard to say with this one, because you can easily conflate the dryness and the kind of roastiness and stuff like that with hoppy bitterness. But maybe it's about 60-ish IBUs, something like that. But always take my IBU count with a pinch of salt. It's probably higher. To be honest, I've been finding that I've been underestimating the bitterness of a number of beers. But the fruity side of this beer, as I said, when you first take the beer in, it's quite sharp. Yeah, it does have that sharper, fruity side of things on the front of the palate when you take it in, but then it mellows out and gives you more of a kind of juicy, berry type quality the further into the aftertaste you go. And again, you get more of the woodiness and dryness and stuff coming out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that you go as well. But overall, a very, very nice Imperial Stout, this one. Certainly impressed with this, and I wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. So big thumbs up to OO Brewing on this one. But to be honest, I'm not surprised how good this beer is, because they know, Ole Anderson knows what he's doing, definitely. Yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So yeah, this was the Arctos Imperial Stout, 2020 brewed, 2023 released, bourbon barrel aged, 13% ABV. Beautiful beer, and I'm really glad I got to review this one for you here on the channel. It's nice to return to this beer after quite a few years. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from OO Brewing as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the very near future. But until the next time, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out OO Brewing social media, and I will see you guys in the next one. And you'll see the bourbon barrel edition of the long boil barley wine very soon as well. Catch you guys in the next review.